Alright, hello everyone again. I wanted to share my thoughts on something. This is basically, I guess, a response to, I don't know. I think basically, in my personal opinion, there is a huge bias um against Christianity, and I kind of want to explain my perspective, I guess, on where that come from and why that is. And I think ultimately there's a bigger point I'm going to make about this. So yeah, let's just get into it. So in some videos that I make, I talk about how I've observed and experienced being mocked for I have observed a lot of Christians being mocked for their belief in God or being a Christian, things like that. And I feel like I see a lot of people ignore that in a lot of ways. But I also think too, on the opposite end, I hear a lot of people say, well, Christians are hateful and Christians attack, all of these groups of people, and Christians are doing X, Y, and Z. And I think this is where there is a kind of clash of perspective in a lot of ways, because I, of course, understand the Christian perspective. I always say in all my videos, I am biased to my beliefs as a Christian. My viewpoints as a Christian are my bias. I openly admit my bias in all of my videos, so there's not a confusion about me believing I have zero bias in my perspective on things. And I honestly think if more people were honest about their bias, you could have a more, I don't know, actually objective conversations about things. I think what's harmful is people who pretend not to have a bias on things while actually having one. But anyways, I do acknowledge my bias, but I also really try my best to understand opposing perspectives. So if people are wondering, like, why do I spend so much time, I guess, addressing an atheistic worldview? And the truth is, I spend a lot of time thinking about it because I try to understand. I'm trying to understand that perspective, I guess, in a lot of ways. But I honestly think what I've come to the conclusion is that an atheistic perspective is really just a rejection. It's the rejection of God, it's the rejection of Jesus, it's the rejection of the Bible, and the gospel as a whole. That's basically what atheism is fueled by, is a rejection of the gospel. And I'm saying this specifically because I guess there's this idea or notion that religion is the what's the precedent, right? Do we make a claim that, like, there is a point where the entire world was just atheist, then this idea of religion comes into play, and then religion just takes over the majority of the world, and atheists become the minority, and that religion basically steals from the reality of, I guess, that there is no true God? Or do we say, most of the world believes in God, most of the world holds some sort of religion, I would say. And I've made this argument before that, religion is I've made a video basically said, like, the human desire to worship. Like, people have a desire to, there's this human desire to worship things. And funnily enough, I feel like there are even some atheists who have made this argument in a way by basically saying, you know, well, even if you're not, you can get the same feeling people get going to church by going to a concert. There was someone who made a video about this. And I found that funny, not because, you know, it's the truth in the way that person thinks it is. She's basically saying that, you know, you can find religion in anything. But I don't think she realized that's the point that she was making. She thought she was making the point that, you know, the reason Christianity isn't true is because you can find that same feeling in other things in life. But what I'm actually saying is that there's this human desire for worship. You know, people will worship art, people will worship music, they'll worship the artists who create those things. You know, anything that a person, and this is where I guess the idea or the reality of idolatry that the Bible speaks about comes into play, because people in the Bible, according to God, were constantly worshiping false idols, these things that were not actually deserving of worship. People were constantly worshiping all of these things, but they weren't worshiping God himself. They weren't worshiping their creator. They were worshiping other created things, like humans creations. And this is why I guess my perspective on Christianity is, you know, I believe in Christianity objectively. You know, I understand an atheist doesn't believe in God, but I also feel like sometimes atheists pretend that people don't believe in God objectively, and that God is objectively the truth and an objective reality for those who truly believe in him. It's like, just because your perspective on God and the Bible and Jesus is that it's not real and doesn't exist, doesn't mean that other people hold that same perspective. And for me, I feel like that's often, I feel like why some arguments that are made against Christians don't hold weight, because they're not arguing against the objective reality of God. They're arguing against their already held beliefs of God versus what someone else actually believes. And that's what I was saying about why I feel like often Alex O'Connor's arguments towards Christians or about Christians is sometimes, in my opinion, aren't good arguments, because he's arguing against his own beliefs of Christians versus what Christians actually believe. And so he's not arguing from the perspective of Christians. He's arguing from his own perception, the atheistic perception of Christians versus what objectively Christians believe. And I guess the best way to say it is, like, if I'm arguing against someone's belief system, you should be arguing about what that belief system actually believes objectively. You can't project what you believe they believe and say, well, I believe you believe this, and I'm going to argue against what I believe you believe. You have to argue against what those people actually believe, not what you think they believe, basically, is what I'm saying. So anyways, I guess that's one side of it, but the second part, I actually kind of just distracted myself. I really wanted to talk about what I feel like is a big reason that there's a bias towards Christians. And basically a lot of people will say, well, Christians are hateful, they're spiteful, they push and they're forcing their religion down everyone's throats. But I, as a Christian, could also say the same thing. I could say, well, you're forcing your beliefs on everybody. You are making fun of my belief in God and saying God isn't real and God is made up and all of these things. And it's just like, I often feel like people don't understand their own bias or see their own, people don't recognize their own bias or projection into other people's beliefs. So when I say, I've observed street preachers trying to have like a conversation with people, and this is the other part of it that people never want to acknowledge. If you see someone preaching on the street, you don't agree with them, you could ignore them, right? You don't have to engage in them. But when someone is enraged by a street preacher preaching the gospel to someone who might actually want to hear it, right? But you don't want to hear it. So, and you're enraged because you don't like what the Bible represents, and you don't agree with the Bible or Christians or God or Jesus. And so that person is enraged by seeing this person preaching something they don't agree with, approaches the preacher and starts attacking them verbally, physically, even sometimes. How do you not recognize that is a problem? It's like people not being able to see past their own perspective is often, in my attention, the problem. Because me is like, I understand there's people who don't believe in God. I understand there's people who are going to reject the Bible. And truthfully, it's like the Bible, and this is why I said I believe the Bible is objective truth. Everything playing out now are things the Bible already predicted. The Bible tells Christians they're going to be hated. How do we know that Christians are going to be hated? Jesus was hated. According to the Bible, Jesus was hated by his own people. The Bible never says Christians are going to be loved and widely accepted in the world. It actually tells Christians to expect to be hated, to expect people to not like you, expect people to attack you. And I feel like I don't think there's an irony to it really, other than I don't know how to say this in the best way. If Jesus, according to the Bible, objectively was a good person, had no moral failings, was perfect, never sinned, never committed any crimes, never did anything wrong, and people could still hate him, and he was still murdered, he was still put to death. If Jesus, who was objectively perfect, was punished and attacked and hated by many, what does that tell us about Christians? And I feel like I guess there's this idea, people justify Christians being hated on and being mocked and being ridiculed because they make the claims that Christians are hateful and Christians do all of these horrible things, which I guess is the perception of those people, a lot of times based off of their own personal experiences with religion or with church. I definitely think the idea that all Christians are hateful is an idea that's pushed widely in the media, but I don't believe it's the actual truth. Objectively, I feel like, for me personally, yes, I'm not gonna deny that there are people who claim Christianity and make horrible decisions and do horrible things to people. I'm not gonna deny that there are Christians that have used God or religion to be abusive and harm people. But that's not the majority of Christians. It's not the majority of Christians that are doing those. But I feel like if someone is already biased against Christians and Christianity as a whole, that's what they're going to focus on. You know, it's a bias we learn about in psychology, availability, heuristic bias. There's another bias. I kind of want to look it up so I can remember, because I always forget about the bias I'm talking about. Let's look it up real quick. Types of biases in psychology. Confirmation bias. It's confirmation bias. I think that's actually the one I wanted to. And confirmation bias is the tendency to favor information that supports our existing beliefs. Hindsight bias, anchoring bias. Anchoring bias might be it too. You know, the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we learn. Attribution bias is the one. I think confirmation bias is the one I was looking for, where basically if you already have this existing beliefs that Christians are hateful, you're often going to favor the information or the pieces of information that you can think of where Christians were hateful and say, well, this means all Christians are hateful, because I can think of 3 different ways I've seen Christians be hateful, but how many actual instances of Christians being loving are coming to mind? And there's literally a plethora of Christians being loving and kind to people all over the world. There's a lot of Christians that are doing incredible things for the poor. A lot of Christians devote their lives to helping those in need. There's a lot of Christian, Christian, why is my mind blanking right now? Nonprofits. A lot of Christians devote their lives to literally helping people in need, but no one ever acknowledges those, right? So I do think in a sense there's a confirmation bias that exists because you already have this notion that Christians are hateful and aren't helpful, but how many times have you actually come across a Christian that was mean, hateful, spiteful, unloving? And how many times have you come across a person who was actually very kind, loving, courageous, that was a Christian, and maybe you just didn't even know that person was a Christian? So I often think like people have probably more positive experiences with Christian than negative, but because they already hold this negative belief of Christians, that bias they have towards Christian also often overshadows the positive experiences they've had. And I feel like I even fell prey to that personally. I feel like when I was a lukewarm Christian and had this bias and this is why I said I think there is like this bias exists also in the media. How often do you see the media reporting on all of the good things happening in church? How churches have literally donated millions of dollars, thousands of dollars to help, all of the people going through hardships. How many Christians come together to raise funds for people in need. When the hurricanes happen, when natural disasters happen, how many Christians, how many positive things can you think of the media ever reporting about Christians? I can hardly think of any time where the media has had a positive, as reported on Christianity in a positive light. So, and that's not because Christians aren't doing positive things. I just think the media doesn't report on those things. So like I said, there's also an availability heuristic bias where we don't really have a lot. If someone who's not in church, like I go to church, I'm surrounded by people that I see doing all of these great things. in church who are Christians, helping out, volunteering. Christians, according to, I think there is a statistic that say Christians are the ones who are most likely to be adopt, are most likely to foster kids, are also the most giving. They're the most generous with their donations to like nonprofit organizations. And I think something that someone told me about Hobby Lobby, who a Christian owns Hobby Lobby, they actually have the highest percentage, I believe, of donations of any like company. I feel like I have to look up the statistic for it, but apparently the CEO of Hobby Lobby keeps his profit, has a very low profit margin because they prioritize donating to causes and to nonprofits. So like I said, I do think, like, again, someone who already holds this belief that Christians are horrible, negative, hateful people is often not able to find the positive things Christians do because they're not looking for it. You're looking for things that confirm your already held belief of Christians. It's not necessary. This is what I'm saying. It's not a unbiased opinion to hold. It is biased, and I had that same bias as a lukewarm Christian, especially, the media loves reporting about that Westboro Baptist Church. This is a church that has so many little members, right? But this church made national news. It's like a church that had a congregation of what? I don't even know how many people, 100 people in this church, but they were spewing out this hateful rhetoric, and the media reported on them, and then people were using that, oh yeah, Christians are so hateful. Remember that Westboro Baptist Church, one church out of like thousands of churches in the US, but we're highlighting the one that is problematic, making all of these statements that is not actually supported by Christianity. Nowhere in the Bible does God tell us or teach us to hate other people. The only thing God tells us is to hate sin and deny your flesh. But he doesn't tell us to hate people, to judge people, to condemn people. And I feel like this is where this idea that Christians are hateful, I honestly think it comes from the media pushing a lot of these negative stories about Christians. And that often overshadows, like I said, all of the good Christians that do exist and all of the good things that Christians are doing in their communities. So yeah, there's a bias. There's definitely a bias against Christians that a lot of people don't want to admit they hold, and they will try to justify, like I said, using whatever bits of information support their already held beliefs. But when you bring up, all of the good things, people don't want to talk about the good things people are doing. But like I said, even if you just study the Bible itself and understand the life of Jesus did nothing. He healed people. Like, literally, let's talk about what Jesus did objectively in the Bible. He performed all these miracles, healing people, casting demons out of people, feeding people. He loved children, and he was still hated. So it really doesn't matter. This is what I want to stay at the end of the day. Regardless, you could be the most perfect person in the world and still be hated. And we know this because Jesus was the perfect person and was still hated and despised by his own people. So really, I don't think the hatred of Christians really has anything to do with Christians as a whole just being hateful. It really stems from Jesus. If Jesus could be hated while being perfect, that tells us, and we are called as Christians to follow the example of Christ. Even if we did everything Christ did, if we lived our life exactly like Jesus and Jesus still got hated, we can expect that we will still be hated regardless of how perfect we live our lives. And objectively, that's what we see. It's like you cannot, the hatred people have for Christians, I don't think is necessarily rational or logical. I think a lot of it comes from the hatred a lot of people have against Christianities as a whole is fueled by their rejection of God and their rejection of Jesus and their rejection of the Bible and the rejection of the objective morals that the Bible have. Because what most people have an issue with in Christianity is that Christianity calls out the sinful nature of human beings, is that Christianity says, we are not perfect, we are flawed, and people don't like the idea of sin. And if a Christian tells someone, according to the Bible, you are sin, people say, oh, you're hateful, you're calling me a sinner. But it's not actually hate that it's not actually that Christians are hating people by saying what these certain actions are considered a sin. They're just telling people what the Bible says. And people reject that. But people also heavily have a problem with the belief of that they are sinners. A lot of people reject Christianity because they don't like that idea of sin or hell or punishment for sin. So it's like, if a Christian is being hateful because they're telling someone according to the Bible, this is a sin, now, and that person doesn't believe they're a sinner, then what am I trying to say? So, okay. According to the Bible, though, everyone's a sinner, and that's why I feel like it's a I don't even know how to explain it. It's like, according to the Bible, everyone is a sin. So a Christian has to believe they're a sinner, and they don't have a problem with it. You have to literally accept the reality that you are a sinner to be a Christian. But those who reject Christianity, if you tell them they're a sinner, there's this deep anger they have. And I feel like that anger comes from, one, not having a way to really attack what Christians are saying, because when a Christian is telling people that they are sinners according to a Bible, that's an objective statement they're saying. And that a person who rejects the Bible, even if they don't believe what the Bible are saying, there isn't a way to argue against what they're saying, because a Christian they're not lying. Basically, it's like, if I'm telling someone what the Bible says, you don't have to believe what the Bible says. You can also reject it. You can say, well, I don't believe that, and walk away. But I think what angers a lot of people is they can't argue against what's being said, because it's still the truth, even if you don't believe it. And I hope I'm saying that in a way that makes sense. So it's just like, if people say Christianity is hateful because it calls out sin, I guess, like, that's the idea. But like I said, you can reject it. It's not like Christians are saying you're forced to believe it. And that's why we have atheists, Atheists exist because they reject the notion of sin, because they reject the notion of the Bible, because they reject God, because they reject Jesus. They don't believe anything the Bible says, yet you're still angry about what the Bible says. So it's like, if you don't hold the belief in the Bible, how is it still offensive? If you don't believe sin actually exists, why are you still offended when a Christian... I guess this is the question I'm posing. If Christianity is not true, if Christianity is just lies, And nothing Christians are saying or telling people about the world or about their sin is true. Why are people so offended by anything Christians say? Like, what is the real offense? You know, if I don't believe in sin, I don't believe I'm a sinner, and someone is telling me I've sinned or I'm a sinner, but I objectively don't believe sin actually exists, why am I still taking offense to being called a sinner? The point I'm gonna make is that people are offended because there is a part of their brains. I feel like there's a part of every person's spirit that knows the truth. And I feel like there's there is a, how do I say this? The truth is always offensive when you believe a lie. The truth isn't offensive when you believe the truth. The truth is offensive when you believe a lie. Now, lies don't stand against the truth. So, if I'm telling the truth and someone's telling me nothing but lies, if I know what I believe is the truth, I don't care how many lies people are saying. That's why it's like the truth isn't bothered by lies. Now, lies are only deceptive to those who believe them. But when you believe in a truth objectively, like if I know for a fact 2 plus 2 is 4, and there's someone telling me 2 plus 2 is 5, 2 plus 2 is 6, 2 plus 2 is 3, those people are lying to me. But I know the truth. I know objectively 2 plus 2 is 4. Am I angry that people are telling me 2 plus 2 is 3? Do I attack the people telling me 2 plus 2 is 3? Let me think about this. Also, I hope people understand in my videos, I'm actually thinking out loud and analyzing everything I'm saying as I'm saying it. But anyways, it's like, does me holding the belief 2 plus 2 is 4, which is objectively true, would I be bothered? Why would I be bothered by 2 plus 2 equals 3? Would I be, what am I trying to say? If I know 2 plus 2 is 4 is the truth, it's like the people telling me 2 plus 2 is 3 are lying to me at the end of the day. And does that change what I believe about myself? What I believe? It doesn't change the fact that 2 plus 2 is 4. Now, if I actually objectively believe 2 plus 2 is 3, and someone comes to me and tells me 2 plus 2 is 4, and I'm like, that's not true. I'm angry. 2 plus 2 is 3. That's not true. 2 plus 2 is 3. The truth is actually on the side of the person saying 2 plus 2 is 4, but the person who believes 2 plus 2 is 3 can't accept the truth even when they're being told it. And so they're angry because they don't have a defense against 2 plus 2 is 4, which is the truth, but they're angry they're being told it because they believe 2 plus 2 is 3. I hope that made sense. I kind of am trying to explain something, but basically the truth, if what you believe is true, it doesn't matter how many lies people tell you. Basically, it's like, if all of these people are lying, at least I know I believe in something that's true. But when you believe in a lie and you can't actually attack a lie confronted with the truth is holds on to the lie. Basically, they hold on to the lie. They're rejecting the truth in order to believe the lie. But the person who has the truth objectively is not having to you don't have to do anything else, basically. The truth doesn't have to attack lies. It just has to be the objective truth. So it's just like 2 plus 2 being 4 existing as the objective truth is the reality. It's the 2 plus 2 that's 3 that is actually deceiving people at the end of the day. And it's like the person who believes the lie is the one most harmed and most offended by the truth. I don't know. I might have to come back to that frame of thought and see a better way to frame it. Basically, I think 2 plus 2 is 3 is only offended by 2 plus 2 is 4. If there's a piece of 2 plus 2 equals 3 that understands 2 plus 2 is 4 is actually the truth. It's like, otherwise, if 2 plus 2 is 3 is objectively true, then someone telling it 2 plus 2 is 4 doesn't bother them. I think people are more bothered if they know 2 plus 2 is 4 is actually correct, but they still want to believe 2 plus 2 is 3. I guess that's the point I was trying to make. I think the people you're offended by, the truth is offensive when you believe a lie. The truth is offended. Lies are offended by the truth because there's a part of the person, there's a person that believes the lie recognizes that what is being told is actually the truth. That's the only way, in my opinion, a person would be offended by anything that's told to me. And I feel like I can say that for truth. Let's talk about, I guess, my weight, for example, because I use this. You know, if I was lying to myself and saying, I'm skinny, and someone tells me I'm fat, I'm offended when someone tells me I'm fat because I believe I'm skinny. But if I know I'm fat and someone tells me I'm fat, am I offended? The same way if someone was telling me I'm this is such a bad way to say it, but I guess I'm just being, whatever. People tell me I'm fat on my page all the time, and I'm like, yes, I am objectively overweight. I am a larger in size. That's something that people can look at me and see. Now, that doesn't mean like someone telling me I'm fat is a nice thing to say, but if I held the belief that I was actually skinny and someone told me I was fat, I would probably be offended. But if I'm aware that I'm overweight and someone's telling me I'm fat, it doesn't hold the same weight because they're not telling me something that I guess I don't already know is true, even if I don't think it's a nice thing or a good thing that they're telling me. Now, on the opposite end, if I'm actually fat and people are telling me I'm skinny, the people telling me I'm skinny are lying to me and deceiving me. Now, they're saying that to me, I guess, as a way to make me feel better about myself, but they're still lying to me at the end of the day. So that's, I guess, another way to just frame it. You know, if I believe a lie about myself, like if I'm actually fat and everyone's telling me I'm skinny, so I start believing I'm skinny, the people who are telling me I'm skinny are lying to me. And then someone tells me the truth. They say, actually, you're not skinny. You're fat for you're fat. And I'm offended because this person's telling me the truth, but I believe a lie. So I'm offended by the one person that's actually telling me the truth. I personally feel like that's the best way I can phrase people telling the gospel to people who reject it. It's like all of these people, the true gospel is offensive if you believe a lie. But when you don't believe the lie and you hear the gospel and you believe it to be truth, that is how people are set free. Because if you don't believe in sin at all, if someone who tells you sin doesn't exist, sin isn't real, is not telling you an objective truth, they're telling you the subjective truth based off of a rejection of Christianity. So basically, the people who are telling you what you want to hear are the ones who are lying. And Christians are telling you a truth that your subconscious body is aware is the truth. But because all of these other people are lying to you, you're rejecting the people telling you the truth, and you're angry at the people telling you the truth, and telling everyone that the person telling you the truth is being mean when they're actually the only person telling you the truth. Everyone else is lying to you. That's the way I explain, I guess from my perspective, because like I said, I believe Christianity is objective truth. I don't believe in Christianity subjectively. I believe this is the objective reality of the world that we live in. That's what I hold to be the objective reality of the world we live in. So if someone's rejecting the truth to believe a lie, and everyone else is lying to them to make them feel better about their lie, and then Christians are telling people the truth, the objective truth, they're not sugarcoating it. It's like, if I don't believe the truth, that's why people are offended. They're offended because the person telling them the truth sounds harsh, is harsh, right? The truth is harsh. Truth is often harsh in a world full of lies. But Christians are not lying when they're telling people the reality of sin, because our beliefs as Christians is that sin is objectively a real thing that is harmful to people. So, I don't know. That's the best way I can explain it. And I feel like, again, the only thing I guess people can say to, Christians when they tell them the truth is that their only response is to reject it or accept it. That's I guess the reality of the world that we live in. It's like, you can either believe a lie, you can either accept the truth or reject the truth. And a rejection of the truth is a belief is the acceptance of a lie. Because like I said, we live in everything can't be true. And I feel like 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 3, 2 + 2 = 5, 2 + 2 = 6 can't all be true. Only one of those is actually objectively true, but there's one truth, 2 + 2 = 4, and then everything else is a lie. If it's not the truth, it's a lie. And I guess that's how you can say, when someone makes the claim all religions lead to God, it's like you have a lot of other, it's like the amount of lies that exist in the world is unlimited, right? If there's only one truth, how many lies are there? There's infinite amount of lies in the world about, everything. And I feel like that's why it's hard to know the truth, because we live in a world full of so many lies. There's a deep deception that exists in our world. And I honestly feel like that's why, I don't know, Christianity provides just a level of stability that you can't find in other things. I don't know. Like I said, I think of things very objectively. I don't like subjective truths. I don't like this idea of subjective reality. Well, just because something's true for me, it's like, no, there's no such thing as like your truth, my truth. It's the truth. Like, just because you don't believe something, that's what I'm saying. That's what I guess the point I'm getting to is that what you believe should be objective. It shouldn't be, well, I believe what I believe, everyone else. And I feel like when Christians believe in their worldview objectively, because we have to believe in the Bible objectively, it's offensive to those who believe in subjective truths. well, your religion is true, and so is your religion, and so is your religion, and so is that religion, and so is all beliefs are true, is basically the I don't know, the a universal religion mindset essentially. But it's just like I can't stand for something that is not cannot be stated objectively. I don't know. I do think I probably think too hard about things and overanalyze things and overcomplicate things, but that's just how I guess my brain works to process information so that I can fully understand it in a purposeful, meaningful way. So, anyways, I don't know what the purpose of this video was other than explaining, I guess, how I think about the world. And also explaining why, even if Christians were living, I feel like, yes, we can use the excuse of, there's some Christians do harmful things to other people, and therefore Christianity is bad. Yes, that's an argument some people can hold. Is it the objective reality? Are all Christians doing harmful things or abusing Christianity against others? I don't believe so. However, I also think part of Christianity is the reality that no Christian is actually perfect. And I feel like when you actually understand the story of Jesus and the fact that even a perfect person could still be hated on, no wonder Christians, of course, are his followers. We're literally following Jesus. Like, being a Christian is following the life teachings of Jesus, accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And if the person that we worship the most was hated, even though he was actually perfect, why would we expect people who follow him to have experienced zero hate? I don't know. I guess I'm basically just saying, like, the Bible tells Christians to expect to be hated on. So, pointing out that Christians receive hate is not even a it's not me saying it subjectively, it's saying it objectively. Christians do get a lot of hate for their beliefs and for being Christians and for believing in God. You know, and the Bible actually predicted that before it even happened. So I guess it's just more proof of the Bible being true, in my opinion. All right, that's all I have.